This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me, I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What is poppin', everybody? And welcome back to another special episode of the Only Friends podcast. Well, you know, it's me and my only friends, which includes and is not limited to my boy Hunt. What's poppin', Hunt?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm chilling,
And
baby.
Hunt
I'm
is
chilling.
here.
Good.
You know, just another day in the
I
life.
didn't think we were getting you today. We got a surprise visit from.
You know, I show up sometimes.
He likes to keep us like on a hook, you know.
I gotta
Yeah,
keep,
we-
I gotta keep my
Jackson.
sidekick on his
Yeah.
toes. I
Keep
make
us-
his life too easy.
Keep us wanting more, right?
Yeah.
We can't have you here every day. You got to miss some. So
Right.
You know.
What's poppin', sidekick? How you feeling today?
We have a company meeting after this show.
Huh?
We have a company meeting after this show.
We do.
A lot to discuss.
I won't be there.
Your contract's on the table.
I won't be there.
Man, I'm just excited to eat.
Shocker. I, for one, am surprised.
Yep.
Hungry.
Here
Are we
for some
going to
food.
the Greek place? Is that the plan?
We are going to
We're
the
following
Greek
through
place.
that? Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
indifferent.
I thought you liked Greek food. Didn't you say you like Greek food?
I don't think you like.
He'll
food,
tolerate
do
it.
you?
I hate Greek food.
I like
Greek food is
Mediterranean food.
disgusting.
That's what it is. It's Mediterranean.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
I like
tolerable.
meat.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
a
There's a
stick.
lot of meat. There's a lot of meat on a stick there.
Yeah.
Greek food has no
Yeah.
spice.
You
Yeah,
don't
I
have.
like
You
that.
have no spice.
Whatever.
It's not the food that doesn't have spice.
This is
It's the
actually
people that
really good.
spice the food that don't put
Yeah.
spice on it.
Yeah. What are you talking about? Greek food definitely has spice. You mean like hot
Yeah,
spice?
yeah. Everything's bland, kind of like it's dry. It's not.
I gotta respectfully disagree on
so.
All
that.
right, what's spicy? That's in.
We're not talking about spice. We're talking about flavor. Those are two different things.
I never said anything about flavor. I said spice.
You said bland.
It's.
Bland
I'm
is
talking
no
about
flavor.
spice.
Ah, you got him. Got him
No,
there.
I'm talking about
Got him.
spice wise.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen,
We got him.
I'm
got
talking
it.
about spice, and it's blah.
isn't it just not hot? Like it doesn't have like Frank's Red Hot sauce on it for you. Like doesn't have jalapenos, and like that just makes it bad.
Yeah, it's just nothing. I don't like non-spicy food really.
Yellowtail collar doesn't have spice.
Yeah.
That's good.
Oh.
Fish is a different story.
Oh shit.
Fish is good. Fish is so good.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you just make shit up on the
Right,
fly.
I
yeah.
don't make up
It's
anything.
very easy to debunk.
I literally eat nothing without spice other than fish.
I would have
You can
never.
get fish there. They have fish there.
I would have never guessed Conrad ate anything with spice. To be quite honest,
Why?
I didn't think you ate hot food. I just see you eating Chinese food all the time.
Oh,
Chinese food is hot.
do
There's a
love.
lot of hot Chinese food.
Could be.
I
He
mean,
is ramen.
I get egg drop soup. I don't even get ramen.
Yeah.
What
I
are
just
your-
get egg drop soup and put white rice in
What
it.
are your
It's okay.
thoughts on sriracha sauce?
I'm not too big of a fan.
What?
Yeah, I really don't care.
Don't look at me. I don't like anything hot.
I know. Yeah, we know that.
Ketchup's about as spicy as I can get.
I really
Heinz
don't care
57.
much.
Spicy
That's
ketchup.
right.
They do make spicy ketchup.
No, get that shit out of my.
Yeah.
I don't even want it in
When
my
I said
sight.
that spicy ketchup, I meant like ketchup. That's.
Wow.
I
This
didn't mean
is-
actual
I like
spicy ketchup.
jalapeno-based
right.
spice, kind of. Like
I'm a s-
everything.
Yeah, you.
I'm a sucker
like.
for
I remember
truffle.
when you
Have you had
first came in,
truffle?
you
Truffle
used to.
oil?
Remember
Truffle hot
you used to
sauce?
make
Like the
lunch
truffle.
all the time. What happened to that?
I just made.
But,
I made
everything had jalapenos in it.
I made
it was
breakfast.
really good.
I made a breakfast tacos this
Yeah, oh,
morning.
yeah.
It was ground beef, 4 jalapenos in 1 pound.
yeah.
That was
It's a red jalapeno.
was good.
That was a taco.
Yeah.
I thought that was Scout's vomit on
Yeah.
the
It was so
on the
yummy.
carpet.
So yummy.
Damn.
Fired at Conrad's cooking.
My cooking is the best. I make the best type of shit. It's all spicy, but you know, Berkey just doesn't eat anything.
Yeah.
Man, this just reminded me that on the podcast you talked about the story where you went to a fine dining restaurant and said, I want my Heinz 57.
yeah, yeah.
It's pretty strong. It's pretty based, actually.
I want it.
It's a flex. Yeah, you want it. You got it.
We don't serve ketchup at a Michelin star restaurant.
Well, don't serve fish and chips,
Yeah.
assholes.
Don't serve anything, actually.
They did have fish and chips, which is funny. It's like we
Yeah.
don't serve ketchup, but we do serve fish and chips.
Well, because they just
Like,
have the.
You know what? You shouldn't serve French fries.
Well, I don't know. Over in England, I don't think they put ketchup on fish and chips. Mayonnaise, probably.
Probably
Yeah,
not.
ketchup is pretty common
do?
on fish and chips.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's because the chef recommended tartar sauce for you.
I don't give a shit what he recommended. He ain't me.
That's right. I want Heinz 57.
I eat what I eat.
Yeah.
I eat what I eat.
It's a very like uppity to be like, you can't eat this with this food. You can only have this sauce.
Well,
Are you serious right now?
it is pretty common in like high scale restaurants. Like if you ask for, I often ask for like salt whenever I get a steak, And there are a lot of chefs that will get offended by that.
I would get offended. I get offended every time you put salt on my brisket. I'm like, I put so much goddamn seasoning and salt on that shit.
But it's not about you.
It isn't about me. It is whatever makes it, better
like
for
the
you.
point of
I
a
just want
chef
you to
is to like
enjoy.
make food that like other people will enjoy.
Well,
right?
it also implies that everybody's palate tolerance
Is the same.
for whatever seasoning you're discussing is generalized.
Yeah. Yours is through the roof. Like, you can never have too much salt.
I'm a salt
that's not
fiend.
true.
Yeah.
That's not true. I know exactly what it tastes like to have too much salt. It's disgusting.
One time,
I can only imagine what that would be.
Oh my god.
It'd be like a mound of salt on top of your steak.
No, this happened to me actually once. I was in
Nothing like exaggerating.
I was in LA and like I got a fish and I didn't realize the salt shaker was one where you like just did the normal movement instead of like the twist, and I twisted and it just went psh, and the whole thing just went on the fish. And I tried because
No saving it.
You know me. I tried to save it.
Yeah, there's no saving
I
it.
tried to like smush
Scrape
it.
it off
I tried to scrape it and like move, like mix it, and like I just took a bite and I was like,
Nope.
it's fine. I'll take a box and figure it out later. And they're
Sometimes she's for the streets, bro. You can't save her.
like, yeah, sometimes
You just gotta let her go.
gotta belong. Move along.
Move along, move
Just to know you.
It's going to be another
The
singing
fuck are
episode.
you guys singing?
All American Rejects, bro.
Yeah.
Knock on
hope is gone. Move along, move along.
Me and Hunter like.
I mean, I know this song, but I'm not going to sing it in public.
What do you mean? Why not? We're having fun here. It's a fun show.
You haven't heard me sing.
It's
I'm
not
going to
public. It's YouTube.
Wait, is it really good or really bad?
Well, the
With the singing.
bad, obviously.
Some people don't want to flex their talents.
if I could sing, I would be doing it.
Could
but
you
I-
imagine
Yeah.
if he's like, all right, I'll sing a little bit. And he just like belts this like opera
Right.
voice.
Opera voice of Move
Yeah.
Along by All American
I'm a
Rejects.
fucking terrible singer.
We all are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what
in
makes it
unison,
fun. Yeah,
in
you-
unison, we become one
Right.
voice of
Everyone together.
mediocrity.
right.
Yeah, but then we uniformly embarrass ourselves. And
There's
as it
power-
stands, me and Conrad have,
there's
kept
power in
ourselves
numbers, you
protected
know?
From that.
First of all, I know what fucking song you guys were singing.
Yes,
Second
you
of all,
do.
That's okay.
You know All American Rejects for sure.
No, I don't.
That's okay. You're allowed to not know.
Uncultured.
Mm-hmm. Uncultured.
Uncultured.
No, to be fair, I don't know what the hell that was.
You don't know
either.
All American Rejects?
No,
Yes, you do.
Sorry,
you had
no,
to be
I
a
don't.
reject to listen
Like,
to it.
I'll keep you my dirty little secret. This is
Oh,
like a-
obviously, everybody knows that song.
that's the same band.
There's two songs that they have. That
Those
everybody
two.
knows.
Those
That's
two
fine.
songs.
That's
yeah.
one
are
song.
the only
I
two
don't know
songs
who
I know.
sings it.
If it was Cameron, you'd know.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, see?
Oh my God,
You
Mamma Mia.
just gotta find the sweet spot. That's
It's just
all.
like, oh, like this song's good, but this one, oh, there's no way I would know this one.
Hey, ma. That's right. That's right. We gonna get it on night.
See, Lavanna knows.
I love this.
At that time, my mom was having a fling with Cameron.
What the fuck? Shut up.
No lie.
Shut up.
Wait,
No lie.
wait. So when he did the verse, I called my boy. Did you hit? He was talking about your mom.
I have no idea.
She was driving the passenger seat driving home.
I have
Sometimes you gotta leave
idea.
him in the
Listen,
streets, bro.
Listen, all I know is that this
Damn.
time my mom was having a fling with him.
Everything else, no idea.
The more you
idea.
know.
Nor did I care.
We're learning a
help.
lot today.
Help!
What do you mean help? You're having fun.
We got to pivot.
You say help. You're the host of the show.
I know. I'm trying to find a way, man.
You are
I'm
the
trying
help.
to find a way.
Matt, has any of your family members dated any rappers?
I have no idea. I doubt it. I can say the chance is probably not high.
British rap is on the
It's
rise,
probably
though.
not
Yeah.
zero.
My mom's dated 3.
3? Who are the other 2?
Jules Santana for sure.
Nope. Some Jadakiss. Or not dated, but like
Jadakiss?
whatever. And fucking,
Man, put mom on blast like this.
Yeah.
she's dead. Who cares?
Jesus, come on.
Oh man.
And there was one more.
Wait,
Somebody Queensbridge.
I was gonna say, was it what's that song? Uptown Baby, Uptown Baby. You know that song?
Lord Tariq.
Lord Tariq, Peter Guns.
No,
Is it Peter
Not
Guns?
Peter Guns.
Nah.
I forgot. Yeah, my mom had a bad history of dating.
Anybody
Actually.
ever wants to know?
They're all drug dealers and rappers.
If anybody wants to know how much salt Matt uses, here it is.
Yeah, his steak is under there somewhere. That's amazing.
If I could think of a good line from Scarface right now, I would use it, but I
Say
can't.
hello to my little friend.
That's the only line anybody
Needs a little
remembers.
Yeah, it needs a little work.
Does Conrad know it?
I was.
I would love for
on
you
the
and
spot.
Landon to know that these microphones have amplifiers on.
No, but it's so much fun though.
Right, but that was an amplified part of the movie.
The two people in this room that do not need to eat the microphone in order to get their voice through is you and.
Nice.
Christ. All right, so
Listen, man, I can keep it here. It's fine.
no, it's
Wherever you
okay. Honestly, it's fine because the second you fuck with it, it's just gonna fall.
Fine. I'm gonna talk.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
There's a big heads up match tonight. I believe they're playing for 160K. Doug Polk has thrown his hat in the arena for the high stakes duel.
Oh shit! Look at that.
I feel like this hasn't been getting much coverage because I forgot this was even happening.
I mean, I just said, oh shit, look at that.
Yeah,
Isn't everybody really bored of Doug playing people heads up at this point?
probably. I think we're pretty bored of high stakes duel too because, like, I mean the big the big grab for high stakes duel is that Helmuth had like an 8-win run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Kuhn just stepped in, beat him for 800K, and
Took it all.
That was it. Kuhn literally walked in, beat him for 800,000. They handed him a belt, and he faded off into the sunset.
Well, I feel like Jason Kuhn deserves the belt. You know, like if there's anybody who should be given like the world championship belt of poker at this point,
Wait,
it should be Jason Kuhn.
doesn't Kuhn have to play a couple more times?
No, nobody will play him.
Oh,
It resets.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
just like, yo, I don't want
That's
to play
right.
this guy. He just won.
smart.
W.
They're smart.
If
People are
nobody
smart.
will sit you, you just get the title belt. You know.
Yeah. So like nobody would play
Nobody
him.
wants to fight the end boss.
I mean,
mean,
well, it's not even that. Well, it's not even just that, but like they have to put up 1.6 million.
Yeah.
So it's not like as if, there's a long list of people who want to play
I'm
a 1.6
shocked Airball
million.
didn't do it.
Sure.
Nah, his stop loss was 1.029 million.
He also is, a deep stack player, so he doesn't want to play this tournament bullshit. You
Yeah,
know,
I get
he's
it.
a specialist.
Yeah,
Um,
an artist. If you
are we
will.
watching this tonight? Is anybody
I'm busy.
anybody into this?
Honestly, absolutely not.
Probably not.
I'm begging to win.
No. I got the Steeler game to watch. I got a Pirate game to watch. I got Love Island, Big Brother, Challenge.
Man,
Jesus
who's got a
Christ.
tougher life than Brian LaManna?
That's an
Just
agenda
works
of
all
shows.
day.
Like that's like a schedule of shows you have to
it's
watch.
gonna be.
It's not even like they're a choice. He has to watch them.
Yeah, it's mandatory.
I am booked. I gotta watch these shows. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
So you're busy.
yeah, I'll catch the rerun.
I will admit that I've watched some of these and they've been kind of good.
They have been good.
But I haven't tuned into many. I basically only watched the Negreanu Helmuth one, if I recall, and maybe a little bit of the Der Helmuth. This format just doesn't interest me.
Yeah.
Is the problem?
I mean, the two people playing, it seems like it would be interesting poker, right? It would be.
I mean,
Oh, they're friends again.
Yeah, I know, but like
Take
The first time they
they're both
played,
also really, really good.
I tuned in
at-
the first time that they played because I expected a lot of shit talking.
Yeah.
and then I was highly disappointed. But that was
Yeah.
also cash. Like the
Right.
format was different.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about heads up as well is we kind of talked about this when you were playing Airball. Is like there's a lot of just like you have to check down to river. Like there's a lot of like
It's
single.
even worse in the tournament version where it's big blind ante and they're
Yeah.
limping a bunch on the button.
Right, so
Limping
there's
is pimping.
there's a lot of like stuff that doesn't make heads up actually that interesting when it comes
Yeah.
to viewing. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
It's slow.
whether this is embarrassing to admit or not, but like Kuhn played Helmuth for 800,000. I didn't even watch a second of it. I don't even think I saw a highlight of it.
that's not embarrassing. Like I didn't watch. I don't think I've watched anything other than like highlights of any high stakes duel that's ever happened. Like
Yeah,
I
it's a
literally
big
just
match though. I
haven't
mean,
watched
like
it.
those we don't see that kind of money getting thrown around all that
Right.
often in this space.
Sure.
But
Or
then
in any
also
space.
that kind of leans into the point of like why I didn't think it was necessary to televise the airball match.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's very hard to care,
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
even over short spurts, let alone over 100 hours.
100 hours of that
I-
would have been just like
Twi-
just boring.
Twitter was the perfect space for your match.
Yeah, I
that
was-
was a fun time.
I was sweating Twitter and the group chat harder than I've ever sweated like a live stream heads up match or anything like that.
It was nice that it was like peak space time because
Right.
Yeah.
It was.
almost like post game interviews.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
you watch a sporting event end and each locker room has a drove of reporters with asking their questions. It really was kind of like that. There were two camps forming. There were two separate spaces that were interviewing each side. You can kind of tune in at your leisure. Honestly, like, I know it'll be forgotten rather quickly, but I think if ever we do look back on that little section of poker lore, so to speak, it really couldn't have played out better. So many of the details are kind of hidden and generalized, and everybody got like kind of a 30,000 foot view of what occurred, rather than this granular, every single hand played, broken down, for the lay person that doesn't give a shit about 8-3 suited versus Jack Deuce off in a single raise pot, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see how much traction this gets. We've been talking about this a lot, about how stream poker in general is kind of what I think is hitting a bit of a lull. And it's a big ask for these game runners to keep putting out content that grabs eyes. I'll be curious to see. Basically, I always use Twitter as the barometer. So how much of this match will be in the conversation on Twitter? Like, how much of my feed will be dominated by this match as opposed to preseason football or whatever the hell else is going on in the world? Like last night, the presidential debate or the Republican debate, whatever, was pretty dominant on my timeline. I'll be curious to see if there's some heads up duel taking place there.
Probably
tonight.
a lot of Steelers stuff that you clicked on.
Stuff.
Yep. Pirates got the Cubs today.
Nothing made me happier to see the BetMGM odds of where the Steelers are to win the division.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
They're at the bottom.
Free money.
Yeah, thank you.
Free money, baby. They're still 8.5 in the books, man. This is like the freest money of all time.
You better bet it.
I'm betting Platt, vig free. But I feel like I need to get way more down.
Can I get?
Do it.
I want to get some down on that.
Well,
8.5.
You gotta ban NFL talk while I'm on the podcast. I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about.
It's sports betting talk, so you can get back in.
I'm not gonna bet a sport I can't even tolerate watching.
I'll bet cricket right the fuck now.
He's clearly never been stuck when he's been betting on sports. You're on like Japanese baseball. You need to try to find a way to get a hit.
Bro, I bet marble races. I don't know what we're talking about.
Bro, I used to bet on like African basketball leagues and just sweat the updates from like Bovada Sportsbook.
Now, what you got to do is bet on the rigged soccer matches in Africa.
Once you figure out which is the right
once
side.
you figure out where all the match fixing's happening, like where the players are like deliberately scoring own goals because they're getting a piece of some guy who's bet an amount on their team to lose. Like that shit happens in African soccer and Asian soccer leagues all the time.
So what
like,
you're saying is, if you can't beat them,
Join them.
Yeah, if you can't beat him, find a guy who's rigging matches in like Zaire or some other Africa that doesn't even exist anymore, like Zambia. I'm thinking of like some minor African league. Find a guy who's rigging matches, pay off all the players, and you're golden.
Talk about soccer. Wasn't there a soccer player that was cheating in poker or something?
Oh, there you go. Good segue. Good segue.
We couldn't bring it up yesterday because I couldn't read the article.
Right. Well, you just have to click the Google Translate.
Google Translate. Yeah.
That's the key. Yeah.
Garbashewski.
Honestly, this player is not like a notable soccer player at all. I saw this being discussed in like a soccer context, and since it involves poker, I thought it was interesting. But the guy who one of the players that I think got ripped off in this cheating scandal, it was some kind of cheating ring involving marked cards and things like that. The guy who got ripped off is a guy named Max Cruz. Yeah. I don't think he's related to Fedor Cruz, but he's actually a pretty good level soccer player who, from what I know, plays pretty high stakes poker as well, and has done reasonably well. And I think is probably a reasonable candidate once he retires from soccer to like continue playing poker. So certainly I would imagine, I mean, I don't know, but within German poker, this probably is
big thing.
It's probably making news to some degree, but doesn't affect us a lot over here. It's just another interesting cheating scandal involving marked cards because that seems to be a theme these days.
This happened in a live venue?
Yeah, I think so. I think it.
Obviously, if it's marked
It's
cards.
hard to mark cards online.
I think it involves like players having set up some kind of procedure to mark cards, but between the translation of the article and the fact that it wasn't being written by a poker outlet, like they I don't think they understood exactly the specifics of the scheme. Like,
right.
It was just some soccer website that was writing about it. So I don't know the particulars, but yeah, marked cards are apparently a big deal these days.
not surprised. There's a lot of athletes who delve into poker after the fact, and I think when you take highly competitive people that may not have come from a lot of money and now have a lot of money, you can see some nefarious behavior begin to exist where it becomes more about being the smartest one in capturing all of the potential upside than it does being good at poker. And I say this just because I know of a bunch of home games that were run by a few NBA guys that were all very cheated.
Yeah.
Like highly cheated.
You got to get in on those soccer player home games. You got to play with like Neymar and all these other soccer players who don't know what the fuck they're doing when it comes to poker.
Yeah, that sounds great.
It sounds like you just got to befriend the game runners and then get a piece of the people that are getting.
Well, Neymar just moved to Saudi Arabia, so maybe you got to move to Saudi Arabia.
I think
Might not be worth it.
yeah,
Probably not.
I'm pretty sure they frown upon gambling a lot. I heard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kidding here because
I heard Dubai has like a pretty big underground poker scene, but it's also like highly illegal.
Yeah,
They're open
Dubai-
at casino.
Dubai's pretty strict. I'm pretty sure.
Dubai is very different from Saudi Arabia, though. Like,
Yes.
the-
Yes.
Dubai, Abu Dhabi, the whole each of the Emirates like that, they're much more westernized than Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is trying, like they're doing a lot of sports washing right now and buying all the soccer players they can from Europe, but it'll be a long time before Saudi Arabia says, "Hey, let's play poker."
Yeah,
Sure.
The win is putting a casino in, I believe, Dubai.
Isn't it true about the Bahamas as well? Bahamians can't play it?
Bahamian locals can't play.
That's
Right.
that's
Yeah.
common whenever you look at a lot of these tourist trap places where the local economy is pretty low and reliant upon
the influx of people coming in. And
yeah,
Right.
you don't want to break your locals. You just
Right.
want to like
Yeah.
trap the money that comes in.
Yeah. Those casinos are like part of what keeps the islands running.
I mean,
for
it's
sure.
got to be the majority, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I saw like completely off, like not off topic, but with soccer players in poker. Mike Joseph got second in a GG tournament, and he played against Sergio Aguero, who won the entire thing. It's like, oh, like this guy's just super good at soccer, and in his free time just fucks around on GG and just plays MTTs.
Yeah, he was here during WSOP the whole time. Like,
Really? That's
yeah,
sick.
he played the 50K and the 100K high rollers, I think.
Really?
Aguero, yeah.
Oh, I just
And
missed it.
Literally,
Fuck.
he's like top 10 players in the history of the Premier League in England.
Really?
And it was super surreal for me because I've watched this guy his entire career. Like a friend of mine who lived in Spain for a while and studied Spanish in college had a shirt with this guy's name on it. And then like a couple months ago, I'm like, yeah, that's him right there. I'm sitting there like on a break from some tournament that I'm in, and like at Paris, and you know, like I'm just sitting in the corner, and like I see a guy like running out of the bathrooms to go back to where they're playing the 50K, and I'm like, oh shit, that's Sergio Aguero. That's this guy. That's this guy who I've probably watched him play soccer like 100 times.
Yeah.
Like it's such a surreal thing.
That's wild.
It's nice when two worlds collide.
Look,
It is,
we
yeah.
talk about football for a little bit. We then bring it to the other kind of football, and then he's happy.
Exactly. There we go.
Yeah,
I'm
now
happy.
he's happy and I'm lost.
Right.
Look, sometimes you got to switch.
Exactly.
I'm fine with it. It would be nice to see, since we were talking about sports betting, it would be nice to see some sort of integration of a predictive market or a sports betting market for these high key premier matches like Heads Up Duel. There aren't that many instances of poker where we are so certain of the field that we can bet on it. But like these like premeditated matches or whatever lend themselves to having a public betting market. I'm surprised that like BetMGM or any of the major local sports books don't get on it.
Usually Bet Online jumps on shit like this.
Do they?
Yeah, sometimes. I'm going to look right now if they have it, but usually
Isn't this what Mike McDonald did with his website?
Yeah, but it wasn't in the States, and I don't know why. I don't want to even speculate as to why he ultimately closed it. Maybe he was just bored. Maybe he felt like it was difficult to be sharp on lines or whatever. But that was a very popular outlet whenever it existed. It's just we all had to do it through private channels because it was based in Canada, I think.
Yeah, Bet Online usually has like, they put up stuff for like the main event and stuff like that, and like usually anything that's a couple months away or like whatever, a month away.
But they just make it like where it's impossible to bet on, right? Because they're not sharp, so they go so conservatively towards giving you a shit line that nobody puts any money down.
Yeah. maybe
$10 moves everything.
when they're like these heads up matches, maybe they're worried that it's too easy to fix. I don't.
Yeah, maybe.
know.
I mean, they're playing for real money.
Right.
It's kind of difficult. Like, I mean, sure, you're right. There's obviously a world where they could fix it, but you would have to be able to get a fucking shit ton of action down.
Yeah.
In order to justify fixing a 300K heads up match.
Usually,
I mean the players themselves.
Yeah,
right.
But that's what I mean too.
Usually, betting limits are like $500 and something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it would be difficult to get enough action down where
10,000
players could be
accounts.
bought off.
That's true. Yeah.
I'd like to open 10,000 accounts, 500 apiece.
And then even then, you still have to kick back like money to them to fix the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you got to get 10,000 different IDs and upload them and
It's fine,
do
just
all the
put it on a tab.
verification progress.
No problem.
Everybody from the podcast, please DM me now.
You got to get an AI to upload IDs for you and like open all these accounts for you. You got to like automate the whole process.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a nice little pivot because I imagine at some point AI will take over the betting market streets when it comes to like online gambling, and I'm sure that this is something that they're probably combating against.
Like with models.
Yeah,
I mean, this stuff already happens, right?
Well, not just with models, but with being able, like the way high frequency day trading works, it became futile for humans to try to do it manually anymore, right? Because you could just build models that were fast enough to basically trade fractions of cents on the dollar at high volume. I would think that at some point betting markets would become the same, like whenever it comes to moving lines, finding sharp lines, all this other stuff. If you can just, similar to like seat scripting, where, you know, online poker cash games were overtaken by seat scripters for a long period of time before they fought against it. I'm obviously not sharp enough about sports betting to know how much of this would be impactful or matter, but I imagine that their security is probably building something to combat against automation, right? Like daily fantasy comes to mind. So there's already like plenty of models out there where you can automate X amount of lineups, hundreds, whatever, things of that nature.
So you think it might be the same for something like best ball?
I would imagine, right?
For sure.
Like just getting a bunch of diversity in your drafts and being able to draft at high volume has to be worth a lot, especially in like underdog and these other best ball leagues where they're big pools. They're similar. I shouldn't say they're like 1-to-1 comparison, but they're very similar to the Circa,
The Survivor.
The Survivor, yeah, where you know you might be in a draft pool of I don't know, thousands, right, with big prizes up top. So it seems like finding ways to be as efficient as humanly possible is probably the biggest edge that you can garner, right? Way more than being sharp.
And that kind of the idea is like you just kind of want to try to automate as many things as you can if you have proof that it's the correct way forward.
Well, if you're sharp in any capacity, you just want to model it and then set it and forget it, right? Like,
yeah.
That's kind of the beauty of AI and things of this nature. But it does kind of bring up the discussion of online poker security and the ways that they're combating against specifically collusion for the context of this conversation. We've talked a lot about RTA in the past and RTA detection and how much more difficult it's becoming now that people have all of these tools available to them that allow them to play a lot closer to GTO and things of that nature. But that's a problem in and of itself. But what's becoming a much more rampant problem, and I think one of the bigger issues that isn't really discussed, is that kind of a byproduct of this becoming a rampant problem is the fact that people are able to iterate on app games. So most of the apps just have little to no security whatsoever, and collusion rings are rampant. And this dates all the way back to the original Chinese apps like Poker Master and Poker Fishes. These were, you know, you'd often sit in a short 4, 5, 6-handed game and just be playing against 3 or 4 people that are card sharing the whole time, kind of putting you at a pretty massive disadvantage.
Yeah.
Even in Hold'em. But when you start to get into the PLO 4, PLO 5 card games, now all of a sudden you might be playing against somebody who has half the deck known to them or a quarter of the deck known to them. And, you know, this kind of does bring it all the way back to the blocker conversation, which we can get into a little bit more. But yesterday Rob Kuhn put out a tweet that said ACR was considering some innovative, creative solutions to reduce collusion. And the idea that they threw out was marked cards being re-entered into the deck. And he kind of prefaced it by saying, like, yeah, I know that sounds weird. However, he was a little bit, he's exaggerating a bit here in his, or maybe he just overlooked it. But he said, however, this completely prevents collusion, especially at PLO when more cards are relevant. It doesn't completely prevent it, obviously. But I do think that there's a big reduction of what information is useful now to people who are attempting to collude. And like I said, when we're talking about like 5-card PLO, 4-card PLO, whatever, it doesn't take that many people being in on it for you to have a lot of knowledge of the deck. So the biggest way to understand this is when we talk about blockers, going back to the conversation that we had a few days ago, when we're talking about blocking or knowledge of how our cards in our hand reduce combinations of our opponent's range or potential holdings that they could possibly have, what that does is it skews equities ever so slightly one way or the other. But what we're really talking about is just sheer card removal. I have the ace of spades, you can't have the ace of spades, right? That's a one-to-one removal effect. But if you just say I have an ace, that reduces the amount of aces that you can potentially have. That's now just like sheer card removal and how it works with combinatorics. When you're playing these 4 and 5 card games and you're able to have vision over, like, let's say 12 cards in the deck, 16 cards in the deck, 15 cards in the deck, something along those lines. Now what's actually happened is when you go to a flop, rather than there being rather than the deck now containing 45 cards if you're playing Hold'em. Wait, no, 47 cards if you're playing Hold'em, 45 cards if you're playing Omaha. It now actually only contains like 35 cards because you have vision over an additional 12 cards or something along those lines, right? And what that does is drastically move equities, right? If you know that the deck that you're playing with now has 12 cards removed from it, you now are effectively playing a short deck where everybody else is playing a full deck, right? That's a tremendous advantage, and that's how these collusion rings are just printing money hand over fist. By inserting all the muck cards back into the deck, what it does is it provides now that everybody is playing with a full deck across the board, right? Because those cards were always unknown to the general populace. And for the people that they're known to, they now only become relevant in that they reduce the amount of combinations your opponent can have in in their hands. Yeah. So it shifts the way the collusion
would work, because in beginning it would be both. It could be card removal at the end.
It's card removal across every single street.
Yes, and also like even pre-flop, if you see that you have a wrap in your hand, all your outs are taken, you're like just gonna not play it as aggressive.
Correct.
So like it takes away the pre-flop advantage and just shifts it to the end. I mean, it's just the same at the end. It's same like.
It neutralizes it a bit, yeah. The pre-flop edge is still there, obviously. Like if you know 12 cards and you know your opponent doesn't have, like if you have suited kings and you have vision over 12 other cards and 3 of them are aces, you know that your opponent doesn't have aces. Yeah. But that knowledge is now only functional on the pre-flop street. Yeah, so if you can't get the money all in, right? It's not really all that important once you get to the flop. Unless, it comes like ace, deuce, deuce.
Yeah. I said that wrong. Like that. I meant the opposite of what I said.
Yeah. Fair.
I meant it's on the later streets is more where you can cheat.
Yeah. I mean, the most important factor here, in my opinion, is that everybody's playing with a full deck, because being able to have enough knowledge of the remaining deck to the point where you can reduce it is actually going to sway equities pretty heavily. Having a little bit additional knowledge over what your opponent cannot be holding will sway equities, but in my opinion, nowhere near as substantially as knowing that the deck does or does not contain certain cards.
You're choosing the lesser of two evils.
Not even.
You're reducing the collusion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're not eliminating it at all.
Right.
Yeah, I don't really see anything particularly bad about this. It is gonna. One thing I think people will probably underestimate is the bunching effect is a real thing, and it is gonna slightly shift what pre-flop strategies look like and what a lot of strategies look like, because there's a slight effect that's created by, let's say, when you're on the button. If you're on the button playing 3-handed, your opening range is going to be slightly wider than if you're playing 9-handed, because when it folds to you on the button 9-handed, there's a slightly higher likelihood of the folded ranges having included lower cards, which means there's a slightly higher likelihood of higher cards being present in the ranges behind you. So that's the bunching effect, and that is going to have a slight impact in most cases. But in this instance, if you're now removing that altogether, your opening range 3-handed on the button is going to look exactly the same as your opening range 9-handed, instead of having like a 0.5% difference. And it's also going to affect.
Well, no,
that wouldn't change.
It shouldn't change anything pre-flop.
Yeah, because those hands are not going into the people's hands now. They're still, everyone still has the exact same hands that they would have had. So if they fold those hands, it's not, they just go back into the muck that could come out on the flop, not into the actual hands.
Right, but what I'm saying is that because there is an effect that is in place when the mucked cards are not going back into the deck, like when you open under the gun.
So you know that there's less chance of small cards coming out on the flop.
Because let's say we're playing 9-handed, the under the gun player, if they're opening 10% of hands, then as soon as they fold, that 90% of the deck is what they have folded, right? That remaining 90%. That 90% is slightly skewed in favor of them having had lower cards, which means when you multiply that by 6 players that fold around to the button is now slightly more likely to be in a situation where some of the lower cards in the deck are more likely to have been folded, and the higher cards are still left in players' hands, slightly more likely. It's only about a 0.5% range difference or something, but it does matter. But you're just removing that when you do this, and it doesn't change anything substantial.
Wait, why are you removing it? That's still true. The cards are all dealt at once. So the big blind and small blind will still have a concentration to high cards.
Yeah.
Whenever 8 people fold or 7 people fold.
That's what I was saying.
The bunching effect it won't be impacted at all.
Yeah,
it's only post-flop that will be impacted.
Yeah.
So all that will be impacted now is that whenever you go to the flop.
Yeah, never mind. Yeah, I'm being stupid about this. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Never mind. Ignore me.
Well,
Scratch that.
No, it's actually a good point to bring up, because I think the biggest pushback to this, or the biggest criticism to something like this, outside of it just like looking a little bit awkward and wanting to keep things status quo and not really mess with what's not broken, I think the biggest pushback is that it's difficult to understand. The initial impact of putting mucked cards back in the deck feels dirty to amateurs, because now a card that they folded showed up on the flop, right? So that feels unfair in some capacity. It's very similar. The comparison I made whenever I was speaking to Pads about it is it was similar to trying to onboard running it twice. I'm old enough to remember when you could not run it twice anywhere. And for a long time, places like the Borgata were way behind. They would let you do equity splits post-flop. Like if I have aces and you have kings and we get it all in pre, they would let you do an 80-20 chop if you wanted, but you could not run the pot twice. And that remained true until like the mid-2010s, like 2014, 2015 maybe. So I remember what it was like to play Hold'em where you weren't allowed to run it twice. And I remember what it was like to onboard recreationals, trying to explain to them that the math doesn't change. But they see pots getting chopped so frequently in situations where otherwise they're accustomed to, like, what do you mean? I had top 2 versus a flush draw. I just scoop there a lot. And they just forget how often they get scooped.
Yep.
And so now they start chopping this pot a bunch, and they're like, this feels awful. It feels like I'm giving up whatever edge I have. And to this day, I still play with recreationals who will not run it twice because they think they're taking the worst of it somehow. They're convinced of it. So trying to educate the general populace that putting muck cards back in the deck will help protect them from people card sharing is a difficult conversation to have. And it's a very, very challenging one to onboard.
It's an interesting one because the problem is the cheating in itself, right? The issue is the multi-accounting.
Yes.
Or like the knowing and card sharing, right? Like you have,
or the collusion
Yeah, you
rings.
have extra info.
Right.
And now it's like, okay, how do we give them less power, but do it in the most palatable way? And there is no palatable way to say, hey, there's card sharing going on. Here's how we have to do it. It's like, oh, like this is scary. It's like, welcome to what is. This is how we're doing things about it. And if you want to play, great. If you don't, like, understand. Like, welcome to gambling. Like,
I think recreational players would be happier to know that the site is actively doing stuff that is supposed to reduce cheating more so than they would be sad to.
So that's kind of my argument.
It's tough, right?
My argument is that, like, I don't think the pros are feasting off of people like Mike Mattisau. I don't think Mike represents the average online quote unquote fish. I think that, like,
online poker would be a lot more live if he did.
Right, exactly. I think the average online recreational is like pretty sharp and probably is a winner live.
I know many people that are like recreational poker players that are just winning at 200 Zoom.
Yeah.
They play for fun, but they want to win.
We're talking about the people that are losing at 200 Zoom, right? Like, well, that's the point.
Well, you're saying that,
I'm saying that, like, I don't think the average online loser is reflective of somebody who doesn't understand that math is a deep-seated part of poker. Similar to, like, the way the average live loser does. Like, the average live loser is a bookie from New Jersey that doesn't even understand that math is a part of this game and thinks he's the unluckiest guy in the world every time that somebody flops a set versus aces.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the average online loser.
They just look kind of like they know that math is real. Or they don't even care.
I think the average online loser is, like, you know, probably on poker Twitter and probably, you know, has at least watched a bunch of YouTube stuff on the game and is like understands that game theory is a thing even if he doesn't necessarily apply it.
It's a weird like answer to your question when it comes to addressing nefarious activity because for the people that are conspiracy theorists, they already are conspiracy theorists.
Yes.
So they don't play anyways.
Exactly. That's my point. They already think the RNG is rigged. So what's the difference?
But at the same time, there is some form of dream that there isn't. Like, you're kind of trying to put something behind a curtain, but you can't put it behind the curtain for game integrity purposes.
Right.
It's like you just have to say, hey, like, there's this shit going on, and, like, buyer beware.
Right. So I view this similarly to introducing the big blind ante, where it's
people hated it at first, right?
100%. I would
have no idea. This is before my time.
I pleaded with. No, it's not. Well, I mean, maybe it kind of is.
I never played without big blind ante.
You know, the WSOP just implemented big blind ante in 2019.
Yeah, I wasn't playing tournaments.
Yeah, he was only 20.
That makes sense. I probably played like sub 20 tournaments with Annie from everybody.
Yeah,
really,
that's fair.
Yeah.
It was a long back and forth with WSOP Brass where I was begging them to do this because that and eliminate antes from the initiate antes from the start.
Right.
And the pushback was always the same. It was the same messaging that we're seeing with something like this, where innovation kills the recreational.
Yep. This is how it's always been. People don't like change. They're going to be confused. They think that their edge is going to be even worse now because they don't understand the new change.
Right. But it's insulting to the recreational because that implication would also state that recreationals will never play a new game format. And we can see that that's just fundamentally false.
No, for sure.
As in, like, I wouldn't have played with the big blind ante or not?
Yeah, basically, like...
Or saying, like, PLO wouldn't get the traction it has now.
Correct, or short deck,
and
or...
The recreationals
mixed
love
games.
the big blind ante because it makes the game quicker, faster.
They also don't feel the ante anymore.
They don't... Yeah, it's like,
they don't... When they're short, they don't feel that they're anteing themselves to death.
Yeah. What does suck is when the table keeps breaking, you keep going to the big blind.
It's rare.
It is rare, but I've seen people
But that's why I'm equating the two, because obviously there are downsides to the big blind ante.
Right, of course.
Yeah, but have you ever doubled under the gun, broke, and then drew cutoff?
That's nice.
That is the greatest feeling of all time.
Right. It works both ways, right? So it's just like...
There's clear downside to the big blind ante that could be unpalatable to certain people. Like you only have one chip left and it goes ante first.
Right.
That's very unpalatable it's crazy to me that we don't
I don't
go
know how
the
it's
more
not
friendly
big.
way.
We should go the big blind first.
Yeah, because like when you're talking about an amateur, if you're an amateur and you have to ante off your last chip, and you know that all you can win back is that chip,
Right.
and you have to survive a multi-way spot, that's
Right.
crazy.
I mean, the counter argument to that is you're essentially paying for the ante for every spot.
I understand
that
the
you're- I know
logic
you-
behind it.
I'm explaining it to everyone.
No,
Like,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I get that there's logic
Right.
behind it. I just don't necessarily agree that it matters, right? Because you also don't play poker without a big blind, but in that instance, you would.
Yeah.
So it's like, which logic reigns supreme? I think, in my opinion, it's generally going to be the one that is best for the amateur. Usually the one that's best for the amateur is they don't have to win a multi-way pot to get one chip back.
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing. I agree with you.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it should be that way.
Sorry,
right?
I don't mean to come
Yeah.
off combative. That
Right.
that wasn't my point.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at here is that clearly this isn't it's not a flawless solution by any stretch.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's an out of the box solution that should at least get some consideration rather than the knee jerk response of this does nothing. Please don't do this, or like, you know, this is bad for the game type of stuff.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, we greatly overestimate what is actually bad for the game. We all have this notion of like thinking we know what's bad for the game and what's good for the game, and most of us are just like way off the mark.
I mean, it's always an opinion, right? I mean, sure,
Generally.
some things are like, call it collective conscious agreed bad for the game.
Yeah.
And then some are more like personal.
Well, I mean, there are certain things that we can know that are bad for the game because they actually gain EV.
Like
Seed hopping,
sure.
right? We know that gains EV. That's probably just going to be bad for the game.
Are there any cons to doing this besides just the unfamiliarity that people have with it?
That's a good question, honestly, and I think that's something worth posing to everybody. I personally don't see any
Like
off
it,
the
it
rip.
won't change equities anyway. Like
That's
it won't
important to
change-
make people understand.
Right.
If you read that thread, they're convinced that like the example that keeps getting given, and this is a very poor example because I think that they don't understand how card removal works. But the example that keeps getting given is I have the queen high flush draw. My buddy has had the ace of hearts in his hand and tells me that he folded, or like we're on the turn and he folds it to put it back in the deck and increase my equity.
Right, but all the other cards get put back into the deck as well. So it's like,
But that's not even the point.
right? I'm saying
If you weren't
I'm
colluding,
going from
right? But if you weren't colluding,
You would never know
Right.
that.
you would never know that the ace of hearts wasn't
That's
in
what
the
I'm-
deck anyway.
That's what I'm saying, right? Yeah, like it's like when you know, like you said, you do 9 out of how many unknown cards there are.
Right.
And the unknown cards doesn't matter if they're sitting in the muck or if they're shuffled in the deck.
Right. So the easy
Right.
the easy counter is like, well, you wouldn't know anything about the ace of hearts
Right.
if you weren't colluding.
Right.
So all this does by the people who are colluding, like folding with the purpose to increase the equities, all they do is bring the equities back to normal.
Right.
Right? So they have if the cards didn't go back into the muck, what ends up happening is they know the equities are against them, and they might make like an exploitatively winning fold, I guess, or whatever
Right.
the case may be, instead of like chasing their draw for the proper outs. And now they just get the proper price to draw because they're back to a level playing field. But everybody's at least operating off the same playing field. Them having the knowledge that those two cards were folded is meaningless.
Yeah, I think maybe the best way to go about it, and I'm not the person to do this, but like if you could like show what it would be like, how equities shift, how much they shift when there's 3 people colluding in
Right.
an Omaha game,
Yeah.
and then take that away, and be like, okay, now they can't do this, and here's how much edge they had, and now they don't have it.
You're absolutely right.
Right?
I think if we could
If you can,
visually
if you can
demonstrate,
quantify
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
it wouldn't be that difficult. We could visually run spots and demonstrate what knowing 12 cards out of the deck looks like, where now you are on a flop,
Right.
and your equity is so say 3 people were colluding together in Omaha. That's 12 cards removed from the deck. Now you understand that you're dealing with minus the flop.
You're increasing your EV, right? Because you know that some cards aren't going to come in distributionally.
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
not
you're-
just equity.
You're looking at a 37
Both.
card deck
Yeah, it's
instead
both,
of a
right.
49 card deck.
Let's say if you're playing,
Or sorry,
let's say you're
45
you're
card
playing
deck.
PLO, you have like middle set, and you see that the like one or two of the cards that would allow someone who has bottom set to one out you are gone. Like if you know that when you have middle set, bottom set is now drawing dead, that obviously is
Yeah,
gonna change your equity in a PLO spot.
or the top set is not possible because those
Exactly,
guys got
right,
folded
same
out. Now
thing,
you know
you know.
you have the best hand.
Right, if it's ace,
right, because
ace
you know
eight.
you're not set over set.
Honestly,
Ace, eight, three,
those are probably like
It's huge.
no. I was gonna say those are probably like the least impactful.
I'm just thinking of spots where you have the most certainty over what.
They're the most impactful
yeah.
as far as certainty goes, but they're probably the least impactful as far as equity shifting go. The way that it's most impactful is if you have a wrap,
Yeah.
and you know that none of your outs are folded, and now all of a sudden you have 15
yeah.
outs out of a 37 card deck instead of 15 outs
yeah.
out of a 45 card
Wow.
deck.
Yeah.
That's a massive shift in equities, right?
Sure,
You
sure.
might have gone from being like a 55-45 favorite to being like a 65-35 favorite,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge.
which is significant.
Let me ask you a question. So, like, say we're 3 ways on a turn, right? And I have a flush draw. We're playing 5-card PLO, let's say.
Yep.
I have a flush draw, and I pot. Somebody folds, and I get called, whatever. Now, that hand gets put back into the muck and
Correct.
shuffled in.
Correct.
And wouldn't that, wouldn't this be bad? Because say that hand contains a bunch of hearts. Say
You don't know.
I get it, but like,
You don't know. Everything we do is operated off of known information. That's why collusion works.
yeah.
I see what you're saying, Connie,
Because
because in multi-way post-flop spots, ranges are heavily weighted in one direction or another, right? So like, let's say in a hold'em spot, you go 3 ways to a flop. It's an ace-high flop. Original raiser bets, somebody calls, third player raises. The original raiser tank folds. Like, disproportionately, a tank fold in that spot is going to be weighted towards like a weak ace. And therefore, if that bet folding range is specifically weighted towards one type of hand, then the one remaining player who's left to act after the raise should factor that into their decision. And the fact that that first player, the original raiser, if their hand is going to be put back into the deck, then if the player who's facing the raise, if they have an ace, they know they still have 2 outs to make trips instead of potentially only having 1 out because an ace is folded, right? So I see what you're saying,
Right, but
but it's
that
also not going to be a big effect.
it shouldn't have any effect though, because it doesn't change the range of the person who is re-raising in that spot on the flop, right? So that range is already so tight that out may be dead, it may be meaningless.
Right, but
Right, like if you're talking about like an ace-9 3 board where it
Right.
goes bet, call, raise, fold, and you know that folder probably had an ace and that ace is going back in the deck, and you have a hand like ace-10, you're not that much more live versus the raising range to begin with.
No, I'm not saying it makes a big difference, but I'm
Right.
saying it does have at least a non-zero impact on strategy.
Well, let's just play the big spooky game of what if you know if 2 aces are gone and you have no more outs to make trips, then you just get the pure fold. You know you can't improve.
Right, but like if those
Sure, it's tough and it's hard. And all that
No,
stuff.
it's not even that. It's if those cards don't go back in the deck. Whether those cards go back in the deck or not, you are
know.
going to find yourself in a scenario where you are against a very strong range anyway, and you're probably factoring that in when you fold. Like, think of it. The most simplified version of this is pre-flop, right?
You find it go back in the deck. You're right.
You find a scenario where under the gun opens, under the gun 1 3-bets, and you cold 4-bet kings. Now, under the gun tanks forever with what you expect to be probably ace king, and he folds. And then under the gun 2 calls, right? And then it comes, whatever. You factor in the fact that like ace king was probably folded there, right? To some degree, right? Or, you give yourself a simpler scenario where under the gun opens, you 3-bet 2 jacks under the gun 1, and then the cutoff tanks forever with what you think is like ace king and then mucks, and then under the gun jams, right? We call there a lot more often because we think like his outs are dead more frequently. That's the simple scenario that I'm trying to create. So like those cards getting put back into the deck, sure, it's going to make the deck a little bit more rich with hands that could potentially interact with a range, but it doesn't change your strategy really at all, right? Like you're still just against this narrow range where you're trying to manipulate unknown information in your head by making assumptions that a tank equals X, right? That's just never really going to be impactful whenever you go post, even in multi-way spots, I don't think, where, you know, a lot of heavy action takes place and somebody who clearly connected with the board folds their hand, and that hand that had clearly connected with the board gets put back into the deck. I don't think the two remaining players are able to benefit or manipulate that at all in their strategy.
It would just have people guessing, like, I think, like, a little bit more.
But
like,
that's what I mean. Like, there's no
It's
guessing.
a subjective kind of
There's
thing.
no guessing because their cards getting put back in the deck is equivalent to them have never been in the hand.
Yeah, I understand, but it's just, I feel like there would be some type of, like...
For what it's worth, I think this is a great conversation because I think that this is the problem with this solution is, like, look, everybody in this room has played for a very long time and is pretty smart and is kind of trying to pick apart how something that truly doesn't impact equities can potentially impact equities. So imagine what people who aren't very thoughtful and don't know very much about poker immediately jump to.
Right.
This impacts my equity. That's why I equated it to running it twice.
Right.
It took a lot. I jumped through hoops whenever I first started thinking about running it twice. Like, I went through so many mental gymnastics of how it has to be impacting my equity.
I don't play a lot of cash, and I usually don't play in games where you run it twice. So, like, I haven't really actually thought about this a lot. And, like, my first instinct is like, well, wouldn't like, if you had a flush draw, wouldn't your equities be different on the second board than the first board?
They will, for sure.
Right.
But you're just, you know, you're drawing to half the reward.
Right.
The EVs are the same.
Yeah.
Your bottom line will be the same over a million iterations,
Okay.
over infinite iterations. But, like, that's not necessarily logical. Right? Because you jump to the extreme and you say, okay, well, I've set over set and I have one out.
Yeah, one out. You can't win both.
I never win when, right. I never win the whole pot when we run it twice.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter because you're only entitled to whatever,
X percent equity it is.
5% of the pot to begin with.
I think there is an element that's different between this and running it twice, though, because the example that, and I'm not saying that this has anything to do with how much it influences collusion or that it actually makes it possible to collude or anything, but, like, the example I'm thinking of is we talked about this Triton event where there was this huge hand where the guy goes all in out of turn with aces and kings ends up folding.
Yeah, Malacca style.
Right. And Chidwick is there with ace king. Now, in that spot, let's say you are Chidwick and you have a high level of confidence that the hand that was folded was kings or queens, right? Knowing that versus knowing that those cards are going to be put back in the deck, when you have ace king in Chidwick's spot there, that very much, it doesn't influence your perception about the cold 4-betting range, but it does influence your equity. Because if you think that 2 kings have been folded and you have ace king, versus if you think that those kings are going to go back into the deck, surely there has to be an element of understanding that influences the equity of your hand.
I don't think so, though.
But how could it not?
Because it's like that person was never in the pot.
But it's not, because
the
range. It's not because the range that they folded is so heavily weighted towards one region of hands. Which
I understand, but them being in the pot just allowed you to garner new information on the person who 4-bet and gain more comprehension over what their range is.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it through the not lens. So if you're confident that, like, 2 kings or 2 queens were folded by that player, then what you know for sure is this 4-better does not likely have kings or queens. Right? And you have ace king, so it's even further reduced. Now that those cards go back into the deck, that just means they're more probable to appear after the flop, which may seem good to ace king. But if you're looking at a range that does not have a high concentration to kings or queens, it probably has a high concentration to aces.
Yeah, I'm not saying it makes it better or worse for your range. All I'm saying is it has to change your equity. Removing 2 cards from the deck versus not removing them from the deck, it has to change your equity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it changes your equity in the sense that if you had a high, if he folded face up 2 kings.
Yeah, this is kind of like the extreme version of it. If it's face up.
So if he folded 2 kings face up and they weren't going back in the deck, and
then the other guy exposes his hands and he has queens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now he has queens and you're sitting there with ace king.
Yeah. Now you're going to fold more often.
Right. But if the cards are going back in the deck, you're going to call more often.
Right, but think about it. It's unfair for kings to have been folded face up. Right? So it's just like if there was unknown information, as it's supposed to be, because the cards are down.
Right, but we're saying
you wouldn't fold.
in this exact scenario, you have a high degree of confidence that those are 2 kings.
Right, and what I'm saying is like that's never important because that high degree of confidence is speculation, and it's just a byproduct of action that's taken place. So those cards being put back into the deck just levels things back off as being unknown again. Right? You would never fold ace king if he exposes queens. Right? So if it's just a guy exposes queens and you have ace king, you would never fold.
No. You
would if a guy exposes queens and you have ace king, you would never fold.
Well, yes.
Okay. Right? So we know that it's a true flip.
Right.
Now, if we know that 2 kings are dead because 2 people accidentally exposed 1 king each pre-flop, we're going to fold, right?
Right.
Is it fair that that a king each was exposed?
No.
Right.
No.
Right. So now all we're doing is leveling it back to the normal scenario, the normal equities, the normal strategy.
But if those kings are exposed and I'm going to fold, but if I know they're going back in the deck, then I'm going to call.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's supposed to be a call. So nothing strategically changes. You know that the cards are going back in the deck, even if you had knowledge over the fact that he folded 2 kings.
Right, but the point that I'm
it's not unfair to anybody.
The point that I'm trying to make, and I'm not saying it's unfair. All I'm saying is it changes equities. The point that I'm trying to make is that let's say someone exposes their cards, the likelihood of them having those 2 specific cards is 100%. If someone doesn't expose those cards, the confidence that we have in them having those 2 specific cards is somewhere between 0 and between 0 and 100%, right? The closer we get to 100% confidence that they have those cards, the more theoretically that card removal factor influences our equity. If we have 1% confidence, like you say, it absolutely isn't really going to change anything significant. But the closer we get to, the more confident we become about the narrowness or the specificity of their range, the more confident we can become about what our true equity actually is.
I agree with all of that.
Sure.
What I'm saying is that's not a functional part of the game. And by putting the cards back in the deck, it just takes you back to 0. Right? So it just puts the equities back to what they're supposed to be. It doesn't change them positively for either player. It just reduces a negative shift that occurred due to information being leaked. So honestly, this is something that I almost think should be implemented live to avoid soft collusion that happens all the time. So for instance, when a board comes 10-10 deuce and a guy stands up and goes, God! It doesn't matter now that he folded a 10 because it's back in the deck. Right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that happens so much.
That stuff happens pre-flop.
Well, it matters a little bit because you know the other player.
But that stuff happens all the time live.
Yes, of course.
Where it goes raise 3-bet, 4-bet, and a guy's staring at 2 jacks, and he's just like, fuck.
Imagine the casino dealer.
Right. No, I'm not saying that it actually should, but the point I'm trying to resonate here is that the equities don't shift in a favorable way for any one person. It just resets back to neutral.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that the idea of neutral is still not truly neutral, because even if you look in a solve, ranges will still be weighted slightly in one direction or another.
You're saying because we know those cards are back in the deck?
I'm saying because players' strategies, when cards are not going to be put back in the deck, there's an inherent slight weighting one way or another.
Right, but I'm saying that's negative. I'm saying that's a negative for someone. So, for instance, if something like that happens where it's raise 3-bet, 4-bet, and we just know that a guy has ace king, and now one of the players has ace king and folds, that's unfair to the person who had kings or aces or whatever that should have stacked him. By those cards going back in the deck, now that person doesn't consider that piece of information any longer and just runs the equities true. And that becomes more level and fair to everybody.
I mean, I see the direction from which you're saying that, but I guess what I'm saying is that card weighting or range weighting in one direction or another is part of equilibrium, and removing that slightly alters the equilibrium. And I don't think that's unfair or fair. I don't think that's unfair to anybody. I'm just saying that the equilibrium with cards being put back in the deck looks very slightly different to what it does without that. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, from what I've taken from both sides, like I think the pros outweighs the cons.
Yeah,
yes.
I completely
I think
agree.
we all agree that.
I completely
too.
agree.
Like even like what Hunt is saying is that, yeah, if it shifts it like ever so slightly, it like the amount of benefit you get from
It also-
not being colluded on and having massive shifts in equity.
Well, you're still being
is, like,
you're still
outweighs
being colluded on.
Yeah.
Right. And it
It's
also
just a
only
matter of what you know.
Hunt's point's only valid if the pre-flop cards are known. If they remain unknown, then it definitely doesn't shift any equities.
Man,
right?
my
don't
only
know.
my only issue.
When you're
Because
talking, when you're looking at a sim,
No, because doesn't the sim assume that you folded
Exactly.
a certain?
Exactly.
If the sim
this is the bunching effect.
yeah, the bunching like the sim assumes you folded this
Bro latched
subset
onto
of
the
range.
bunching effect so quick. You saw that?
wait, what?
Matt goes bunching effect, and Brad goes, "Ooh yeah, bunching effect."
This is
He's like, he's got me right there.
this is what I mean. That
Right.
even in a sim, ranges are weighted in a certain way that the pre-flop cards are not completely unknown. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where like you're not necessarily solving the root problem, but you're trying to remove the weed. And like removing the weed is like fine sometimes, but at the same time, like still finding ways to get the root cause is going to be the most important part.
Right. Sorry, I don't want to be pedantic about this, but the reason why that's not true, the bunching effect, is because those cards, whether they're put back into the deck or not, were still always an unknown portion of the deck. So like I understand what you're saying, like when two ranges are pitted against one another, they are devoid of all these other hands, and therefore all those other hands are assumed to be in the deck. But that's not truly the way that it works, because all of the hands that are in our range cannot actually be in our hand. We can only possess one at a time. So the Sims do still assume a full deck. Always.
I mean, if you're talking a post-flop sim, yeah, because a post-flop
Right,
sim...
but we already agreed that pre-flop doesn't matter, because the bunching effect is still in effect in pre-flop. Those folded cards have nothing to do with the hands that are already distributed.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So now when we go to a post-flop sim, the entire deck is still complete. It's a 52-card deck.
Is it though?
Yes. It has to be.
Prior to any action taking place, yes.
Right, but like the sim doesn't like take into account that like what you should do post flop if it assumes the first 6 people folded, assuming that now certain cards are removed,
A post-flop sim...
possibly removed.
A post-flop sim that you run for a single board doesn't take into account the pre-flop bunching effect.
Okay,
I think that's what you're
That's
saying.
what you're
Correct.
saying.
It can't
Right.
because we don't hold a single
can't,
hand.
but-
We
Gotcha.
hold a range.
Right.
What I was originally saying to begin with is that there is still a post-flop bunching effect in multi-way spots.
Okay.
In that if there's 3 players to a flop, the action that the first player takes, followed by a second player, followed by a third player, the more actions are taken, the more the remaining deck from the cards or from the distribution of cards that got to the flop, minus the flop, the remaining deck is still weighted one way or another based on the actions of the players who have acted up to that point. So it's a different kind of a bunching effect because it's not taking place throughout the whole deck. It's taking place throughout the 3 ranges that get to the flop, but it still does theoretically exist. I'm not saying it's a big factor,
Yeah.
but it does. That theoretically there should be some small influence, simply just based on the weighting of ranges in multi-way spots.
Would you say
Speaking
that?
of weeds, we're in the weeds now.
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weeds.
I'm not. I don't really want to debate this point because I'm not all that convinced. But would you assuming that we agree that does exist? Do you think it's big enough to even weigh into your strategy?
Yeah, I do. I think that you should take into account, particularly when it's like it goes bet call, and you are trying to figure out your raising strategy, or like this is why multi-way sims in certain instances or certain lines, it's why they'll prioritize having bluffs that block sets. So they'll bluff with bottom pair instead of bluffing with like a backdoor, because bluffing with bottom pair is going to be better than bluffing with a backdoor, because if it goes bet call, then the backdoors are disproportionately going to be some of the hands that the caller is going to then fold to the raise, and so on and so forth. So the reason why multi-way sims will choose certain bluff combos differently is partly because of the bunching effect that occurs when there's 3 or more ranges.
Is that bunching though, or is it blocking value and unblocking folds?
Well, the bunching effect is just another word for a blocking factor. It's
what I'm hearing, or what I was hearing, was basically saying our strategy should change because the deck will have more or have less of these certain types of cards.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that part I disagree with.
Well, the
notion that you shouldn't raise a backdoor there because you're likely up against a backdoor more frequently, I think that's just like too unknown and too specific.
Well, within a sim, it can't be, because everything's known. That's what I mean. The frequencies within the sim are all known.
Yeah. Okay. So like the percentage of the time that there is a backdoor there is going to impact your potential realization or equity or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But I get. Sorry. Let me rephrase. I guess what I was getting at is that is all defaulted to the strategy and not something we need to think about. We don't need to think about the fact that, like, because it went bet call, I should be less inclined to check raise a backdoor here because I could be I could be 2 fewer outs remaining in the deck some frequency, right? Like, we'll just derive our frequencies from the sims based off of their true EV and equities.
Yeah. I'm not saying that we're like, I guess what I'm saying is it's all considered at the same time, right?
Right.
Like the quality of a bluffing candidate with a backdoor in a multi-way spot, it's a product of the actual equity that you have against the 2 ranges, plus your combined fold equity and all of these other things, fold equity on future streets, all that stuff. And the extent to which, like, if you raise and you get 1 call and 1 fold, the extent to which certain cards are likely to have been folded is already pre-factored into what choices we make regarding what hands we're going to raise.
Yeah.
But if we were able to run a sim where in that specific instance the folded cards were going to go back in the deck, I think it would probably have a bigger impact on strategy than most people would think. But I also don't think it's a big enough impact for it to not be worth doing this.
Yeah, so I guess like that's the crux of our disagreement. Is I'm of the impression that once we get to the turn in this sim that you're speaking of, it's still a 45 card deck or 46 card deck, or whatever else is unknown. So
that's something I'm actually not sure about in terms of which solvers would take into account that and which wouldn't.
Yeah, like I'm of the impression that, like, say we choose to check raise hand class X, we don't suddenly land on the turn with a weighted disproportion to clubs. Like, I wouldn't think that the 8 of clubs would come less frequently.
Yeah, see, that I think you're right about, because I don't think most solvers account for that. I don't think they account for a slightly higher likelihood of certain types of cards to come or not.
Right.
But they do account for...
And that was the only point I was trying to get across for the putting cards back in the deck.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, it doesn't change the frequency of what cards are going to come, but it does change whether or not it does change anything that relates to our understanding of our opponent's ranges, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And again, that's the downfall of this.
Right.
Is not necessarily the cards getting put back in the deck, but we're only able to reduce the collusion to the point of having vision over the deck. They'll still have vision over the range construction. So the contortion of your opposition's range will still be impacted when
they
we know
those cards are not in your opponent's hands.
Right.
Still.
Right. Rather than removal, which is what's happening now, where people were able to eliminate the size of the deck based off of known cards that were folded. Now, instead of removal from the deck, it's actually
from your range.
It's a morphing of your opponent's range.
Right.
We know that we basically get to, like, heavily weight their range in certain directions, based off of known cards that are actually in the deck.
Right.
Right. So now it's known cards in the deck as opposed to removed cards from the deck. And the only argument I'm trying to make is that's a significant step forward in the reducing the effectiveness of the collusion.
Yeah.
But it's also why this is not the end all be all type of solution to collusion.
Right.
Because there's still some upside in being able to weight your opponent's range in a certain direction.
Yeah.
So I think we were always saying the same thing. We were just kind of framing it differently.
I'm coming at it from a perspective of if we were able to plug into a solver the fact that the cards were going to go back into the deck, how would it change things?
Right, and I think the way that we could actually do that, it would be weighting our opponent's range certain ways. So if they're supposed to have 100% aces, but we have some sort of knowledge of cards that went back into the deck, maybe their combinations of aces get reduced in half.
Right.
Something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to bring this up because I think it's an interesting topic of conversation in the sense that it's an out-of-the-box solution, and we should be looking for more of those, even if they do come with a little bit of ruffling of the feathers when it comes to quote-unquote the everyman, the recreational, the casual players. I get it. You don't want to change their environment. You don't want to change the rule set that they're accustomed to playing under, but you do want to get to a point where online isn't necessarily dying, right? And I do worry that like we're moving closer and closer to that because when you zoom way out and you look at how online's being cheated, it's all through data, all of it, RTA, collusion, data mining, like every single bit of it is gathering known information in a game that's supposed to be fully protected with no known information outside of your 2 hole cards and the board texture, right? So the only solutions will be creative ways to either de-weaponize that data or render it useless. And the only way to do that will be to structurally change something about the game. Whether that's putting muck cards back in the deck, or it's throwing certain monkey wrenches into the mechanics of the game. It plays counterclockwise once every random number of hands. I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily know. I don't have the ideas per se, but I don't think we should be so closed off to these new innovative solutions because they're addressing problems that are obvious to anybody who cares.
Yeah, I definitely am a big believer in creating these weird wrinkles in the game that make it harder to solve.
Hopefully it's not through the cheating lens.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, this is another segue into, we're filming Poker Out Loud this coming week.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to, we're gonna play
Looking
some
forward to card sharing?
7 Deuce Bounty, some 7 Deuce Bounty, some stand-up game, right?
Stand-up game, like bounty, bomb pots. We're going to do a bit of an homage to the original idea of Poker Out Loud.
Is it going to be the sit-down stand-up game?
Yes.
Yeah. I know I can hear pigtails in my head right now. Like can't everybody standing
don't
up?
actually stand up.
Yeah,
guys.
we have these cameras set.
But the idea is to make this as reflective of a live environment as possible and force everybody to do as much brain solving and play as much street poker as imaginable. And I think that these little wrinkles are great ways to take people out of their comfort zone. I also think like increasing stack depth, which will generally increase SPR across all nodes, is another good way to force people into making critical decisions in real time.
Can we do like a massive ante as well? Just like
yeah, I'm kind
everything in there.
of. I mean, we were definitely gonna do at least a big blind ante. I'm kind of into the idea of playing with larger antes, and we've been doing this more live, where rather than putting a straddle on, we'll just double the ante or triple the ante.
Yeah, we should definitely do that.
Yeah, I think that these are all good wrinkles that basically force wider ranges to play, and that's really always what people are looking for when they're trying to drive action, is to force you to play an uncomfortable portion of your range that you could otherwise just comfortably fold.
I gotta spend this weekend running some big anti.
Here we go. There's always one in the game.
And it's not me anymore.
If you're gonna get a tournament player to sit down in a super deep stack cash game against a bunch of guys who are
really
definitely better at cash games than him, you got to at least allow me to run some sims.
We'll spot you pre-flop.
Man, there's a conversation here, but I'm gonna save it. Okay. I'm not gonna do this today.
That's good.
Because like I think that my cash game in tournaments, not the whole conversation, but like I think that my poker game overall has improved so much from playing both.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think
You know what
that's
I mean?
always true.
So it's like if you get better at tournaments, you're gonna get better at cash. If you get better at cash, you're gonna get better at tournaments. If you've played the format, not just instantly jumping into the new one.
I would just think about it if you're thinking about it correctly.
Yeah, that's the trick.
If you're thinking about like what you learn in tournaments to like say when you're shorter or something, like if you just apply it or think about how it affects you when you're playing cash.
I think MTTs are a really great way to find betting lines for low SPR spots.
Oh yeah.
Like I think too many live players fuck up low SPR 4-bet pot spots where like SPR is 1 and they turn it into a 1-street game and they're just all in, as opposed to like MTTs where they'll play the same spot where maybe it's only a single raise pot or a 3-bet pot, but they find 3 streets of betting. I think being able to find those creative betting lines are really, really, really valuable and powerful. And I think the inverse is true of cash. Like playing really deep SPR spots where ranges are both wide and narrow can force you into learning a lot of like geosizing and, you know, ways to creatively get the money in by the river that tournaments don't necessarily lend themselves to.
Yeah, for sure. I think in MTTs there's so much of a tendency to like you get down to a certain stack. Like people get down below 25 bigs and they just like don't bluff post.
Yeah.
They just like they want to just make a good hand and just jam all in on the turn and hope they get a fold, and there's so much opportunity to play multiple streets of poker even like way below what stack sizes people think.
Yeah. That's been put on display in these high rollers for sure.
Yeah, it's funny, one of the guys that was in one of those high rollers, Johannes Strava, I played a hand against him 6.5 big blinds deep or 5.5 big blinds deep at Venetian this summer, where I limped the small blind and bet jammed. 5.5 big blinds deep.
There you go. Yeah.
I went 1 big blind, 2.5 big blinds all in on the river, and he called me down with like an 8 on ace jack 8, ace 5 or something, and was good. And I was like, oh well, I've never bluffed 6 high for 3 streets with 5 bigs effective before. And you know, there's a lot of stuff you can do in tournaments when you're thinking outside the box a little bit. And it was I think it's going to be a big area that expands in tournament strategy once people realize like you don't have to play push fold at 15 bigs.
I hope it comes full circle where it's like that meme of like the low IQ, high IQ, mid IQ.
Oh, that's totally going to be what it is.
Where it's like low IQ all in, mid IQ like find ways to bet 3 streets, and then high IQ all in.
100%. I mean, 100%. It probably will do that. Like, I mean, like
I'm just waiting it out to get past the mid section because I can't do it, man.
Espen against Chidwick in that 3-handed spot. He found the 12 big blind non all in 3-bet from the big blind with aces against the button open. Like Chidwick opens min on the button and Espen just makes it like 4.2 big blinds from the big, and Chidwick jams with ace king, and Espen just, you know, holds obviously with aces. But yeah, that's the way it's going, man. People are. I'm looking forward to finding a 3-bet fold off of like 9 bigs. So, I'm gonna.
You're a fucking tortured soul, man.
It sounds like a tortoise to me.
That's a tortoise soul.
I cannot wait to take like ace deuce off and 3-bet fold it off.
Oh
9
my
bigs.
God! On that note, I'm so happy you turned on the music for that one. My God, that sounds painful.
That is pain.
It does sound kind of fun.
Quick reminder, there is an Academy September 1st. We do still have a couple seats available. I do believe we're going to do a giveaway probably sometime next week. We have a bunch of giveaways in the holster that we got coming up.
We're giving it all away, huh?
Yeah, I think we're going to give away an Academy seat. We have a WPT cruise.
Ooh.
That we'll be doing a giveaway for at some point.
Are we going on that cruise?
I'm not sure. Probably not. We'll see.
I'll
though.
find a way on there.
Landon might find his way there.
Are we allowed to enter the giveaway?
No.
That's bullshit. We're not allowed to go on the cruise or enter the giveaway.
You're allowed to go on the cruise.
We're not getting a free cruise. Okay, never mind.
We'll talk a little bit more about that next week, so be sure to stay tuned. If you guys are interested in the Academy, head to academy.solveforwhy.io. Be sure to sign up today. I believe there's only a couple seats left. On that note, we're out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Pacific, as I have a day date in the Bellagio. That's going to do it for us.
Not a real date. You're just playing poker.
Don't do that when you don't want us to talk about it.
It's true. It's true.
You self-report, and then when I bring it up, you give me the laser eyes.
Now the music, but the music
is
cueing us off.
We'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, smash that button. We'll see you then.
Later, squad.
Bow, 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 bow.